From the high desert in the great American Southwest, this is Art.
Line 3, you're on the air.
I've been listening to you off and on for years, 54 years old. I even remember listening to you when I was in high school, late at night, trying to find you on the AM dial, going back and forth. One station would finally go out, and I'd have to find you on another station.
Real time travel is such a romantic notion for me. How about you? He's gone. We lost him. He said, out of gas. He said he only had 10 minutes, and I guess
that's true.
His 10 minutes are up.
That's an incredible story. People coming back. People never leaving. People who die, whose spirits remain here for some troubling reason. Usually troubling. What a remarkable string of stories this morning.
Time and spirituality meet the road. You've got to wonder if some of the strange things that we discuss here, the apparitions, the ghosts, the spirits, the whatever you want to call them, if they don't have something to do with time. All right, well, listen, thank you very, very much for calling.
Okay.
I've got a scoop. I'm Art Bell, and from the high desert, this is Coast to Coast AM.
Her hair is hollow gold, her lips sweet surprise, her hands are never cold, she's got Betty Davis eyes, she's kind of music on.
Your alternative talk radio contact. The Planet. KGRAradio.com.
With infinite complacence, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design, man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space.
Welcome to another episode of Into the Fray, leering at you from the woodline. Visit the mothership at intothefrayradio.com. There you can find all the episodes, the blog posts, ITF gear, and sign up for the free guest newsletter. The weekly show is, of course, always free and available in all podcatchers, but if you'd like to support the show, and why wouldn't you, go to the website and click Become an Insider, which in turn gets you extra content each and every month. And by the way, if you would be so kind as to leave a rating and review in your listening platform of choice, Cosmic Karma shall be yours. Be part of the discussion by joining the interactive ITF Facebook group, follow on Twitter at ITF_radio, and Instagram. If you have an experience that you'd like to share, email Shannon at intothefrayradio.com or call the hotline anytime at 844-866-3366. Thanks so much for listening. Now, if you would be so kind, buckle up your safety belts. Put that tray table in the upright position. Liftoff is upon us.
On this episode of Into the Fray, I have Brennan Storr. And he is the other half, I'm sure he would argue the better half, of the Ghost Story guys. Brennan, welcome back on the show.
Thank you, Shannon. Always good to be here.
So on, was it March 18th? Middle of March? I think it was 18th.
Yeah, it was
last
18th.
month. Yeah. You came into town 2 different times, but the first time I was a little too busy to go do what we wanted to do. And what we wanted to do, or at least spoke about, was going to Zak Bagans Haunted Museum. I know it pains you even just to hear his name or say it. I know this. I do.
Oh,
because it's the same
like
for me when I say the word dog man. I'm like, just makes me
it's like Voldemort.
Yeah, just rolls off the tongue in a way, right? Okay, so here's the thing that folks need to know, and maybe you can kind of set this up, or if you want me to, that's fine. But it's not like, well, I mean, I was excited to go because I knew he had amazing artifacts in there, and so did you. However, you're not the biggest fan of Zak Bagans, so it's important to give everyone that snapshot, because it's not like we're both going, we're definitely going to see a ghost, and really cool stuff's going to happen to us for sure. I mean, I think in fact the word bullshit came out of your mouth while we were sitting in the lobby waiting for our tour to begin, right?
More than once, as I recall.
Yeah. So, in fact, I remember texting you and going, oh gosh, on Yelp it says that there's like a 40 to 50 minute wait, and you're like, screw that, it's not worth waiting for. I was like, come on, dude, we have to see that Dybbuk box. And so we did show up, and actually there was no wait whatsoever.
No, I guess everyone, well, it was a couple days after St. Patrick's Day, so I guess everyone was, or no, it was the day after St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, hungover.
So I guess everyone's sleeping it off.
Yeah.
So I guess, I should sort of paint my my relationship as such with the phenomenon that is Zak Bagans. Of course, I host the Ghost Story Guys podcast, available everywhere podcasts live. And on there, Ian and I have done a couple episodes where we have come across topics which have been presented on Ghost Adventures, which is, of course, Zak's show. And his research, or the people who do his research, I think may be deaf, blind, and dumb, because a lot of the stuff they've covered on the show that we've talked about has been nonsense. And I'm not a big fan of his stuff. I think he's kind of I think he's bad for what we do. I mean, he's made a fortune off it, and good for him. But I think he just invents stuff out of whole cloth, and he's got people marching around in the dark with night vision cameras acting like jackasses with no real information. But he's sort of emboldened people to do that, and I'm not a fan. But what's funny is I don't really think about it too much, and I think we've only mentioned it a couple times on the show. But it's become one of our defining things is how little we like Zak Bagans, and I mean, I never thought. I'm Italian, so I understand grudges. Believe me, I get it. But I never thought part of my existence would be defined by my opposition to someone I've never met. So that's been unexpected. Fun, but unexpected. So when and I didn't know that there was any artifacts of worth at the Haunted Museum. I had no idea. I didn't know he had the Dybbuk box, although that's a whole other thing. Don't get me started on that, or I'm sure we will later. But no, I didn't know he had anything of worth. I thought it was just sort of him sitting in this ridiculous playhouse full of crappy dolls he bought on Alibaba.com. And, I don't know, playing with himself, staring out the window, looking into the middle distance. Like I was not I didn't know what to expect. It was more just, it was for the novelty, because I was in Vegas and we were sort of thinking, what would be cool to do? And I really wanted to bag on it. That was my big thing. I wanted to go there, and I have a notepad ready, and oh man, I'm going to mine comic gold from this schmuck. And that's not really how it turned out, I guess.
Much to your chagrin.
Much to my chagrin.
So you wanted a bag on Bagans.
Hardcore. Yep.
We show up, we walk right up. There's an outdoor area where I assume they had this, little partition there, because I know there's been a line. I've seen people post pictures of the line, but we walked right in. You get to take pictures only in the lobby, and you're waiting there for about 10 minutes. They're kind of setting you up for the creepiness. We had a couple of the cast of characters walk through, right? A shorter gentleman came through and kind of scared one of the young ladies that was in our group. There was 9 or 10 of us in our group. They keep the group small, which is nice. And our tour guide's name was Stacia. She was awesome. She was great. She spoke well of everything. You can tell she enjoys being there. And we'll get into this later, but not all the rooms do you have. I mean, I suppose you wouldn't have to go in any of the rooms if you really didn't want to, but there were a couple that she pointed out, hey, this is an optional room, or hey, if you're if you're still only 18, you can't even go in this room anyway. But there was only one room where she says, well, even for tour guides, we do not have to go in here. And she did not. So anyway, okay. So kind of skipping around. But I don't know how you want to, if you want to kind of talk about some of the other rooms. Well, let's start off with this. I think one of my favorite rooms was the cell, the serial killer room, because he had some crazy artifacts from folks in there.
No,
Right,
that room was very, very cool. Of course, just before I'd been in Vegas, I was over in Los Angeles, and I went to the Museum of Death. And that place was crazy. I mean, the amount of serial killer art and artifacts and it was a volume of it was incredible. And when we were talking about going to see Bagans' place, I thought there's no way he's going to have anything that equals the Museum of Death. But his collection of serial killer stuff was impressive, as much as something like this can be. I mean, yeah, he had Manson's dentures. He had one of Manson's prison shirts. I think he had one of Richard Ramirez's shirts. He had the Hollywood Division, what's it called? Mugshot chair.
Mugshot seat, yeah. In fact, what was she saying? That OJ actually took a shot in that chair, and she's like, hopefully he never comes by, because this is the very same chair, right?
Well, the very same chair, the ID thing on the front is set to his photo number, and they have his mugshot with that number.
I missed that part. Part. I was stuck in the back room. I noticed that a lot of people didn't like looking at that screen when it was kind of shuffling through, what happened to some of the victims of the serial killer, and it was pretty graphic. I don't really mind that kind of stuff. Doesn't turn my tummy, but people seemed a little somber in that room. It wasn't as lighthearted as like the clown room or the all the puppets. The marionette room with our friend there talking about clowns. I'm like, yeah, dude, it's always a clown. I mean, people don't like clowns. So there was how many rooms? 30 plus rooms in this place? 11,000 square feet, right?
It's a massive, massive place. I can't remember the exact number of rooms, but a massive place. And some of the rooms, of course, were just straight museum pieces where you had dolls and I think that was the thing that surprised me. Was I expected this to be, like I said, some place where he just bought a bunch of crap that he thought looked creepy, put it into a room and said, no, it's haunted. And of course, That's not how it works, you idiot. But it seems like he's just, I think on our show, I called him the Willy Wonka of weird shit. Mm-hmm. He's got this collection of stuff it's vintage, and these things aren't just bought and made to look creepy. These things have history, and that's kind of cool. You've got rooms stuffed with actual skulls, and vintage dolls and vintage carnival stuff, and that was really, really interesting.
Okay, because I know that in that first room, when it has like the Zak Bagans Zoltar machine and it's speaking, that's where the skulls were. I know at that point you have already said this, that you were still like kind of rolling your eyes at that point. But at what point do you remember when you were like, oh, well, heck, this is actually pretty damn good?
I think it was the serial killer stuff. I think once I got to the serial killer stuff, I mean, I was impressed by right away. I was impressed by just how detailed everything was. How well planned and well organized. But with the Zak Bagans Zoltar machine, I thought, come on, and they asked someone for $1 and they put it in the machine, and the machine gave some nonsense. The person didn't get their damn dollar back. Mm-mm. So that spiky haired goon just sucked another $1 out of some poor bastard. And I mean, at that point I thought, oh, okay, I get this. And there was a couple bits where they had the little guy, I can't remember his name, but when he popped out and did his spiel, I thought, what are you doing here? Why? Because it didn't totally fit. And he was doing some strange accent that was somewhere between English, Australian, and stroke victim. Yeah. I don't know what was happening there. I think for me, the serial killer room was the first time, A, where I felt there was enough light for me to see everything properly. B, I had enough time to actually take things in, because that really was a drag in that. And I guess they have to do it because, they got to get people through there, and it's a long tour already. But, there's so much to take in, and they kind of hustle you from room to room. And I almost feel like they haven't figured out their format yet, because remember they had placards in each of the room with information on them.
Right.
But A, it's too dark to read them, and B, you have no time to read them.
Yeah, there's no way. I mean, even just walking down the halls from room to room, there's recesses and shadow boxes and pictures, and like you said, there's like placards and things with captions, but you have to go. You got to walk, you got to stay with the group, and Stacy is doing her thing, and you want to hear what she's saying because she's really good and the information is interesting. So yeah, there's no way you would have time to look at all that stuff. You know, the cost to get in there, I think it was like just a few dollars less for me because I was a local, but it's hovering around $40, right, to get in. But I will say that once you get in there, they take the time with you. It's a 90-minute tour. I mean, you're rushed, yes, but you don't, I mean, you feel like you get your money's worth, at least I did, especially with the two of us and what happened with Peggy, which we will get into. Yeah. I agree. I think that once they get that dialed in, that place will be even more bad at the bone. And you can tell that dude loves that place. He's poured a ton of money in there, and all the detail, even down to the light fixtures. I think you should have a special payment or something where you're like, you know what, I'll sign my life away. I want to go into the basement where all the satanic rituals were held and hang out with, what doll was that down on that chair in the basement where you could see the bottom of the stairs where we weren't allowed to go? I can't remember.
No, I can't remember the name, but she'd been moved from elsewhere because supposedly she was, whatever surrounds her had been quite active.
Right. Yeah.
I think the price is fair. I mean, $44 US is what I paid. And that's not cheap. But as you said, it's a 90-minute tour, and there is just so much to see. But I guess if there are lineups already for that, then I guess you just can't have people kind of come in and look at stuff, because there's no way you could possibly monitor. Because I as someone who used to collect things, I think I understand old Baggy to a point in that you don't want people touching your shit.
Right.
You don't want people touching your gear because this is your gear, and you spend, you know how delicate it is. You spend a long time collecting it. You don't want people messing around with it. So I kind of get why you wouldn't want people wandering around at their own pace.
Yeah, in fact, a lot of that stuff, it's not under acrylic and it's not under glass. It's just kind of hanging out there. I mean, the more important pieces and spectacular pieces, they are. But in fact, I remember you mentioned to Ian about Ed Gein's cauldron. How insane is it that he's got that thing? And it actually still has blood of some of the victims and everything. And that room was so cool. I don't know if you ever actually... Did you get a chance to walk all the way to the back and kind of look at the sweeping cathedral ceiling that, it was converted into that barn scene with the, they had the lightning flashes going. And I don't know if you were able to appreciate that, but I was like, holy crap, this room's cool.
Oh, that room was probably my favorite room, and for those of you who aren't familiar with it, basically, Bagans renovated part of, I guess, 2 stories really to resemble Ed Gein's barn, and complete with peaked roof, and I didn't see the lightning, but I did notice that the back wall, which was all timber, the boards are spaced just enough that there is a light source behind them, and it looks like moonlight is coming through. And it was just incredible. I mean, again, I think the guy's a dope, but or rather, I don't know him personally. I shouldn't say these things.
It's just your impression of him. That's all.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of his show and his persona, but anyways, he is obviously lavished a lot of love and attention on this place, because that room or that barn replica was just something else. I didn't really have a chance to sort of admire the ceiling. I saw a bit of it, but I was kind of looking at the shovel and the cauldron and other things.
One of the rooms that I hadn't seen on a list anywhere of things that were in there, because I had read more than you had on the museum. I know that you knew of a couple things that were in there, but one of the things that surprised me was the Natalie Wood room.
That was unexpected.
Yeah, I was not expecting that at all. And I don't know what to make of shadow beings, and photos are always so like, it's, who the hell knows what that is. But, so the long and short of it is, if you guys come out here, you definitely have to go to the museum. And if what we've said so far hasn't piqued your interest, then maybe this next little tale will. And keep in mind, this is a public museum, and these people do not know us. And we walk in, and this... when did we go into Peggy's old abode? Was that about an hour in, you'd say? Maybe?
Yeah, I would say
around there.
About an hour. It was once we'd gone to the second floor.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to let you tell it, since it is your tale, because Peggy likes you, obviously.
Oh, boy. Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay, so there are, like Shannon said, there are 3 rooms which were 18 optional and 18 only. I mean, I guess technically all rooms are optional, but there were 3 that they emphasize as being optional because they are, very active. Ooh. And the first room turned out to be the Dybbuk box. And I nearly fell over laughing because the Dybbuk box, I'm sure everyone's familiar with the story, but what a lot of people don't seem to know is that the person who owned the Dybbuk box before Zak Bagans was named Jason Haxton, and he actually wrote a book in which he investigated the history of the Dybbuk box. And the person who first made it public, the person who first put it on eBay, whose name I forget, I think it's Kevin something, he admitted to Haxton that he made the whole thing up. He admitted that he had...
Sorry not to interrupt you, but I listened to your last episode, and I had never heard that. I said a 4-letter word after you brought that up, because I didn't have any idea about that. I had no clue. It broke my heart.
Yeah, and the only reason I know that is because I tracked down a copy of Haxton's book, which is out of print. But I mean, and I think I said on the show, it's such a classic thing, especially now in this day and age, that the truth is out of print. But if you want to find the BS story, all you got to do is punch it in Google and you'll find it. Because it's again the LA Times article that started the whole thing. There's of course the movie The Possession about the Dybbuk box. Everyone who's had these experiences, but Haxton, he says, I think it's Kevin Mannis was the guy's name, and he admitted to Haxton he'd made the whole thing up. But going into the room in the museum, you wouldn't know that because he's got the Dybbuk box, and it was cool to see it because I've read about it and I've heard about it. But I felt nothing in there as far as presence goes, absolutely nothing. And they've got, of course, because a Dybbuk is supposed to be a Jewish demon, and they've got this murmuring prayer, which is supposedly a prayer of protection playing over the speakers, and they've got all this writing on the walls, which is allegedly a Hebrew prayer, and they've got all this
around the box.
Salt around the box. I forgot about that.
In the acrylic case.
Of course.
Yeah.
And like that, I mean, sure, you could ask questions about why certain people have experienced things after being near the box, but I think a lot of that is psychosomatic because it's got such a history and some people are so suggestible. And I suppose you could also say that, maybe something attached itself to it because, it knew that it could feed on the energy of people coming and going. But as far as the story of Havilah and the evil demon that had, chased her out of the concentration camps, no, that's nonsense. Mannis made all that up. And it's kind of a funny story because Haxton actually went, I think Mannis is from Oregon. And so Haxton actually went back there with him to sort of discuss the origin of the box and to see where he bought it. And when he finally pressed Mannis, well, show me where you bought it. I want to talk to the family. He all of a sudden couldn't remember where the house was.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, and then finally that's when he came out and said, no, I'm okay. So it's eventually he admitted that it was a fiction. So I was not very impressed with the Dybbuk box room, and I thought, okay, so if this is the 18 plus rooms, yeah, I'm not too worried about this. This is exactly what I expected. That said, when I stepped on the property, or rather when I stepped in the house, I did feel something. I got a bit dizzy, which tends to happen if I'm entering an area with a lot of energy to it. But I didn't think too much about it. But then we went to the next 18-plus room, and of course that was Peggy, the haunted doll. Now, I didn't know anything about Peggy. I'm, again, not all that impressed by haunted dolls. We did an episode on Annabelle, and, I mean, that's mostly nonsense. Not mostly, that's nonsense. Everything the Warrens say is nonsense. But behind the door to Peggy's room, we could hear this really loud noise. And Stasia said, that's a ghost box we have set up in there. So we go in the room, and the room is set up like a little girl's room with a hutch at the far end that has Peggy in it. Now, you can't actually get over to her because, we don't want people touching these things. But the room, it's lit all creepy. And I should say, actually, before we went in there, I had this feeling that I really didn't want to go in there. And this surprised me because, like I said, I had not I felt much of anything in this place before this, and I thought this is nonsense. I'm going to get out of here, go have a drink, maybe some chicken wings. But no, I didn't want to go into that room, but I thought, well, I don't want to look like a pussy. I gotta go in there.
Right.
Yeah,
because you hadn't mentioned that to me at all. Not that we had a lot of time to converse or anything, because they're hustling you along and Stacy is talking. But yeah, we weren't talking about that at all. You didn't say, Shannon, I got a weird feeling here.
No. I just kind of kept it to myself. And as you said, there wasn't much time, but I went in, and it's really loud in there because of the ghost box. It's just constantly cycling through stations, mostly just white noise. And Stacia told us before we went in there that you have to say hello, Peggy, when you enter, and goodbye, Peggy, when you leave. And so we walked in the room, and everyone's hello, Peggy, hello, Peggy. And she said with the ghost box there, sometimes if you ask questions, she'll answer. So people were asking questions, but the ghost box was so loud, and everyone was talking once. And I mean, we heard little blips from the ghost box, but I mean, I don't put much stock in ghost boxes. I'm for a guy who does a paranormal show, I'm a hard skeptic on a lot of stuff, and I've never really heard anything from a ghost box that particularly impressed me. But so you hear little bursts of words outside the radio, outside the white noise, but nothing that sounded like anything. So finally, Stacia said, "Okay, well, we're going to go on to the next room. Everyone make sure you say goodbye." So we all said, "Bye, Peggy." And then I'm one of the last people to leave the room, and I hear through the static, "Brennan." And I walked out, and I thought, did I hear that just now? I'm not going to say anything, because I'm probably just making that up. And then Stacia said, "Did anyone hear that right at the end? It sounded like Brennan." And I thought, crap. Okay. I put up my hand. I said, "Well, my name's Brennan." And she said, "Interesting." She said she has been saying names today, so that makes sense. She looked surprised, actually, Stacia did. I gotta say.
She did. And like I said before, I didn't want to call you out if you weren't comfortable enough, or maybe you didn't hear it, but I had also heard it. And I didn't want to, when Stacy's like, "Did you hear Brennan?" or something like that, I wanted to go, well, this freaking guy right here with me, his name's Brennan, but I wasn't going to throw you under the bus if you didn't want to go there. So I was glad that you did. I was glad that you heard it, because I did as well. And I thought, oh my gosh, I would have brought it up to you later, but having someone that doesn't know our names go, "Did you hear such and such?" That was a pretty cool confirmation.
Oh, it was. And I ran scenarios, because the skeptic in me, it's like this thing that just happened in the office, which we'll talk about a little bit later. The skeptic in me went, okay, no, that can't be real, as it always does when things like this happen. And I started trying to mentally try to think of ways I could have done this. I was thinking, the only people who they knew my name. Well, you didn't mention my name when we were in there, but they do take your ID when you pay by credit card. And so I thought, well, maybe that's why. Maybe they saw my name on there, and they decided, they somehow broadcast that thing. Because, I mean, I would not put any kind of skullduggery past old Bagsy. But it just seems so unlikely. And it's not impossible. And if there are any hardcore skeptics listening, obviously I can't say no, that didn't happen. But it was the fact I didn't want to go in that room beforehand that made it hard for me to deny at the end. Right. It made it hard for me to go, no, this is crap. That's not real, because I genuinely felt something beforehand and didn't want to go in there. And then, of course, we got to the third adults-only room, and I had the same feeling, and I didn't go in because I thought, no, I'm not doing this again. Because the other thing that happened was after I left, and I don't know if I mentioned this to you, but after I left Peggy's room, I was exhausted.
No, I only heard you mention that to Ian when you were talking about it on your show. So no, I didn't even know that. So there was the prior feeling, the actual act of her saying your name, and then you just being drained. Yeah, I was wiped right out. It took me about, I want to say 10 or 15 minutes to kind of get back to baseline. But I was and the only time I recall, well, not the only time, but
One time I remember that happening very dramatically is when I was passing through a neighborhood here where I live, which I know is very active, and nowadays I just don't go near it at all. But this is back when I was still kind of poking the bear and wanting to see if this stuff felt real to me. So I was going near this house, and a voice told me, well, don't walk right in front of it. Just don't do that. Like, it kind of heard his voice in my head. Mm-hmm. More of a feeling than a voice. So it's sort of the same instinct that told me not to go in that room. So I thought, okay, well, I won't walk past the house. I'll kind of walk down the block. But as soon as I stepped on the block that house was on, I felt like I was moving through molasses. It's hard to describe, in the light of day, and it's harder even to make sense of it, but it felt like I was moving through molasses. And when I stepped off the block at the other end of the street, it went away. But I was tired.
Because I know that you and Ian are both more sensitive than a lot of other people. It would be awesome to see Ian go through there too. I would love to go in there with Ian and see what kind of impressions and feelings he gets.
Oh, me too, because I think Ian is a lot more sensitive than I am. He seems to get much more specific images and things like this. And just probably because he's a lot older than I am, way older than I am. He's so old. He's not here. He can't stop me. He's old.
Poor Ian. Yeah, no, I mean, I've called Ian just straight out of the gate. I've just labeled him, he can basically remote view. I mean, the guy, he can see stuff. He sees places, and it's actually spot on, like scary spot on. So it would be pretty cool to see him in some of these rooms. I would like to see him go in the Dybbuk box room just to see if anything at all. Like you said, maybe there is something attached, but it can't be as nefarious as they're making it out to be.
No, I think if anything, it's the situation because I should step back. Stasia had said that they've been seeing shadow people in the Dybbuk box room, and I think if anything, it's a situation similar to what I encountered at the Lizzie Borden house. Is that in that you have something there, but it's not connected to what you expect it to be connected to. It's something that feeds on the emotions of the people who come to see it. Yeah. It's like raccoons being attracted to a pile of trash. It's not necessarily attached to the box, but these things are like animals in a way, and they go to where they know there's going to be food.
Oh, and there's that much focus on one item. I mean, so much energy gets poured into that thing, and then now you have, I don't know, how many people you think go through there every day? A couple hundred, maybe?
Oh,
they have time at least, right? I mean,
easily. I mean,
yeah, we were fawning over it.
We were the second group of 10 on a slow day, and there was a third group behind us.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's 30 in the span of in less than an hour and a half. And again, that's a slow day. So I have no doubt hundreds.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if they put thousands through there once they get up to speed, because it's still fairly new, I believe. It's just opened in October.
Right. Well, considering the different levels and all of the rooms, I mean, they could probably even have a couple more going at the same time. And only a couple of times did we actually even see another group doing their tour. We're in various stages of our tours at the time. So a huge property. That house was, from the outside, I mean, you have no freaking clue what's going on in there. It's massive.
No, the outside looks like a dump, but inside, no, it's completely different. I was curious. I didn't actually have a chance to ask you this. Did you feel anything in the third room, the third 18 only room, the room that even Stasia wouldn't go into?
I didn't, but that's not saying much. I never do. I'm just not a sensitive person, as hard as I've tried. But I will say it was really creepy. I went in there with that couple. In fact, it was the woman that did the Bagans Zoltar, and she was really excited when Stacia said that he is on property. Zach is here, and she kind of was, squealing and really excited about it. I went in there with those two, and I was even asking them. I was like, "Oh, do you guys, do you feel anything?" And they're like, "No." But he did have a replica of what he supposedly saw there at that house. So, no, I didn't get any feelings. It was a really cool room. Patch of dirt under some stairs made it look like a basement. And, I'm assuming an exact replica of the demon house. So, no, nothing at all. I know that you didn't want to go in there. It would have been interesting to see if you had actually felt anything in there, though. But if you get that feeling again and you've already gone through Peggy's little dollhouse situation, I can see where you're like, yeah, I'm good on this one. I'm all set.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of my sort of running gags, it's not even a gag, it's true, but some people think I'm joking. I say I'm a reluctant, if there is such a thing as a reluctant paranormal investigator, it's me. Because I don't actively seek this stuff out. I don't make a point of, I don't do Ouija boards. I don't do tarot cards. I don't do ghost hunting. I don't do any of that stuff. And yet, it finds its way to me. And so when I got that feeling from that room, because I think in that room was the staircase, one of the staircases from the demon house is what I think that was, and some of the dirt from there. I got a sort of a no feeling, and what was interesting is when people would open the door, I really didn't like looking in there. Something about it bothered my eyes. I can't even explain it. Something about looking in the room I found upsetting.
Was it a feeling where like you kept wanting to look even though you hated it, or you had to look away?
It was like I had to look away. It was like it was just, I don't know, it's hard to explain. I kept looking, like my attention was drawn there. But then once I looked, I looked away because, no, I don't, something about it was unpleasant. And the only thing I can liken it to is I've discovered that if there is something to which my attention is drawn for no apparent reason, it's usually because there's something, supernatural or paranormal or whatever you want to call it, about that place. I mean, when I was on the Queen Mary in Long Beach, there was this curtain, black velvet curtain on one part of the ship when I was exploring late at night that I just kept looking at. And I couldn't figure out why I was looking at it. And as I got closer to it, all of a sudden I felt that this just immense pressure in my chest and this sensation that I was not welcome. And, so I backed out of there pretty quick. But when we got up to the second floor, it felt, or rather, while I was going up to the second floor, it felt like something was tailing me the whole way. Like it's like someone was standing right behind me, almost as if to make sure I left.
Didn't you say there was an area that your mom just wasn't comfortable and didn't want to go down or stay in very long or something? Or was that?
No, yeah, that was the Queen Mary. Yeah, right at the very bottom of the ship. I think it was the bottom, maybe the second floor, where the entryway to the Titanic exhibit is. We were down there. It was quite late. I want to say it was midnight by this time. And there were 2 weddings on the ship that day. There was one on the top deck and one down where we were. And so there were all these very, very well-dressed people, you kind of at this point staggering around in and out of the hall. But so we weren't alone. But when we went down this one hallway, which looked like every other hallway we'd been in, all of a sudden my mother, who's she's sensitive, but she doesn't talk about it. It's not something she, I don't even think she understands how sensitive she is. Out of nowhere, she blurted, "We shouldn't go down there." And I looked at her, and she was as shocked as I was. She said, "I don't know why I said that." And I said, "Okay, well, that's as good a sign as any."
Right. Did you get the same? You didn't get the same feeling that she did. You were just respecting her wishes.
I felt uncomfortable, but nothing that sharp. But I'm at the point where I don't expect that I feel everything. Because this is such a nebulous thing. If I'm somewhere and someone else says, what, this isn't great, then okay, yeah, sure, I'll listen to them. There was a time years ago when my wife and I were traveling with a friend and we were looking for a motel, and there was this one we were pulling up to, and it looked okay, but my friend is very sensitive, much more so than I am, and she said, "Not this place, please, not this place." And so I thought, okay, well, you know more than I do, so we'll just roll with it and not go there. But yeah, I mean, generally, I try to trust my gut, but I also, if it's someone I trust and they've got that feeling, then yeah, I try and roll with it. And so we left. But what's interesting now, you might have to help me out here because my memory of this is a bit shaky. That night on the boat, I had crazy World War II dreams, which I guess makes sense because it used to be a troop ship, and I'm sure it's just I subconsciously picked up on a bunch of this stuff reading the placards and things. But there was one dream where I kept hearing Brad Pitt's character from the war movie Fury shouting at the character's name Norman. And when we were at the Haunted Museum, correct me if I'm wrong, there was some kind of artifact there with a spirit named Norman attached to it.
I do vaguely remember that. Unfortunately, I don't remember what artifact that was. What Was it the?
It was-
remember when we were looking at the Iron Lung? It was just prior to the demon house room. Was it that late in the tour?
I feel like it was earlier on. I feel like it was in a desk or something that she mentions, maybe a desk that Zak works at.
Oh, one of the skulls. Wasn't it
Maybe
one
that's
of the...
what it...
Yeah, I think that's what it was, but now I don't remember the story exactly behind it. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it could be a coincidence. I mean, I did see Fury about a month ago, so who knows? But
right, good movie.
But great movie. Yeah, I was surprised.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, interesting coincidence either way.
Because as far as the feelings go, and I totally agree, it's not impossible. They did get our IDs. Now the timing would be tough because unless she has some kind of a button, under her shirt that she pushes to say, okay, we're in this room, time to activate one of the names that we got from the IDs.
Well, they had cameras everywhere in there.
True. That's okay. That is true. Yeah, I forgot about cameras like in every room, which, hey, you can't blame them. They've got a lot of cool shit in there they don't want people to touch, as we said many a times. But
oh, yeah.
We can't discount the feelings that you got prior to and afterward. I didn't realize you were that drained for that long. That I had no idea about that, because especially everybody keep in mind how reluctant he says he is and how he's okay with saying, I really thought this place was bullshit. I went in there thinking it was bullshit, and you kind of wanted it to, to be fodder for the show to poke more fun at Zak, but that's not what happened. And the fact that you got these, you have the opening feelings and then the closing feelings, and in the middle, something speaking your name through a ghost box. I don't know.
Well, when you add in the fact that, or rather, when you add in what happened in the studio about a week ago, actually it was a week ago today. It sort of lends a little more credence to it, I think. And I mean, before we get there, this has happened to me before. I when I did the tour of Tranquille, which is a large former TB sanitarium on a lake near Kamloops, BC. It was definitely haunted. Fascinating place. If you're ever in that part of the world and they're doing a tour, I definitely recommend checking it out. Again, former TB hospital, former mental hospital. It's like a small town almost that's been abandoned there. They're trying to rejuvenate it, but honestly, my feeling is that the land doesn't want anything to really take root there. The land wants to be left alone. But I mean, money often trumps that, so we'll see what happens. But anyways, I did this tour. And then on the drive home back to Victoria, I heard this bang on the car door, and I thought, oh, it must have been a rock. So I didn't think too much of it. Then I was sitting at home with Nikki, my wife, later that night. We're in the living room chatting, and all of a sudden on the wall behind us in the kitchen, I hear bang, like a knock. We looked at each other and thought, that's weird, but okay. Then she went to bed, and I was, in the bedroom saying goodbye, and I was going for a drive. And the closet door next to me, knock, and it moved. And we sort of looked at each other and thought, well, that's weird. And the last thing finally happened the following morning. We were driving to breakfast, and on the roof of the car, knock. And that was it. It never happened again after that. But, there is sort of a precedent for these things following me home. And I kind of wonder if that's what happened here, because I was in the studio working on my radio show, Largely the Truth, 8 p.m. Pacific on 92.5 Stoke FM and via the web at stokefm.com. Mm-hmm. And Shannon did a bumper for me. It's great. But, so I was working on the show. And usually what I do is I record, because my mic skills are not such that I can go live yet. It's just not there. So I record the show Monday, and then it airs on Wednesday. So I was in the studio doing my segments when I started getting a lot of electrical interference on the computer, and I thought, well, what the hell is going on here? Never had this problem before. It's a pretty great computer. It's very fast and never had any issues. But it just kept these sort of scratches sounds and again, just electronic noise. I thought, well, this is annoying. So finally I finished my edit. I opened went back to the main screen and went to listen to the whole segment. When in the middle of my speaking, you can hear what sounds like a woman's voice saying, hello? And I nearly ran out of this place. I didn't know what to make of it. no one had been here, no one had been talking, and I couldn't figure it out. Now, the music to my show, the intro and outro music, the outro has the sound of a phone ringing, and at the very end of it, you hear a woman's voice saying hello. So I thought, okay, maybe that got transposed somehow, but I didn't know how that could have happened because, that's never happened before, and so I ran it past Steve and Rachel, who are they're the band Hexagram, and Steve is great with audio. So Steve had a look at the waveform, and there's nothing in there to indicate an electrical spike. There's nothing in there to indicate any kind of anomaly. The waveform, Adobe Audition allows you to analyze audio in a couple different ways. And so he went through all the different iterations of that wave file, and he eventually found that hello. He found, sort of in one of the analyses, you can see where it kind of distorts, where it kind of comes in under where I'm speaking. There's nothing to indicate that it was an electronic anomaly, and he could not make it match the hello that happens later in the show. He said in order to even get it close, you have to speed it up by 2.4 and adjust it this way. And he said even then, it's not a match. It's just it's closer.
Right.
And so but once I heard that hello, the electronic interference stopped.
Oh, I didn't know about that. Once the hello came through, no more problems.
No more problems. I heard my show replays Sunday nights at 8, and so I was listening to it last night. Nope, everything else is fine, clear as a bell. Once I heard hello, it was fine.
What the hell is that?
It's an excellent question. I mean, what's sort of makes it even more interesting is the Thursday before that, Ian and I were in here recording episode, I believe it was episode 30, and he was telling me a story. And as he told me the story, my attention again was drawn away from him. And the way the mics are set up, we're on opposite sides of the table. And from my side, I can see the front door because there are 3 rooms, I guess you could say, in the studio. So I could see the front door. And I felt like the darkness was massing, and I couldn't look away from it. He's telling. I kept glancing back at Ian, and he's telling me the story. And finally, when we went to a break, I apologized for not having the focus, and he said, "No, it's fine." He said, "I felt it too." And we've had that happen. Certain topics seem to whip up whatever is in this building, and I mean this building is very haunted. It's in what's called Bastion Square, which is it's the center of downtown Victoria, and that used to be the site of a prison. And there have been, I mean, again, I don't subscribe to there are deaths here, therefore there are ghosts here, but there have been, there's a prison, there were hangings here, and I think there are powerful forces that move through here. I think if anything, it's kind of like a gateway. I don't think it's the building itself. I think it's like a rest stop, on a highway, and things just move through here. And that, I don't know, whatever was here that night, and I don't know if that was what I heard the following Monday. I heard something, and I'm going to play that clip on our next episode of the Ghost Story Guys, which is episode 31. That'll be out Tuesday the 17th. That episode will be out, and so we'll have that clip on there. It's not the first time we've heard an anomaly in the studio. I don't know if you remember the episode where I caught what sounded like breathing.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It
sounded like an animal breathing, but this is even more stark than that. I mean, when I played the animal breathing for some of my friends who were more skeptical, they said, well, that's just electronic noise. I mean, it doesn't sound like any electronic noise I know, but still, they said it was electronic noise.
That would be interesting if it was electronic noise. Do you remember what episode you guys played that on?
I don't, but I can find out real quick if you want to.
Yeah, sure. May as well, right? Welcome to my world. People are like, what episode was that? I was like, how the hell should I know? 31 already. It's flying by, man.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it's been a year and 3 months, year and 2 months. So it looks like it's episode 23.
Okay.
Where we have the sound. And during the recording of the L.A. episode, we picked up a strange noise. And I tell you, man, the L.A. episode, that was a nightmare. So it's kind of interesting that came through on that episode, because that was just it was a pain in the butt to research, and it's the only episode we've released that I'm still not happy with. I just don't like how it came out. But that's the one which that turned up on.
Maybe some kind of energy felt that, and it just came out in some kind of an audio form, right?
Well, I mean, I do wonder. I know after the ferry episode, number 26, I had a lot. While I was editing that, I had a lot of issues with the equipment, and I sort of, I know our researcher Luke suggested that it was just kind of psychosomatic. I sort of psyched myself out knowing about ferries, but I didn't really think one way or the other about it. Going into it, but editing that episode, man, the sound levels were off. The audition wouldn't cooperate. Again, weird. Just annoying little glitches, not audio glitches, but just program functions that should work and just suddenly weren't. And then I think what else happened? We subscribed to a music service that we use for our bumper music when we can't find an artist who wants to have his stuff on our show, and out of nowhere that disappeared. I went to log in one day and they said, "Yeah, you don't have a membership here," and we paid a not insignificant amount of money for that membership, and it's good till I think July.
Those are pricey, yeah.
Yeah, and it was gone. I had to get a hold of the woman who signed us up initially, and she said, "I don't know what happened, but yeah, here it is again."
Oh, how does that even? Things don't just disappear from computers. That's impossible. See, I wish I could blame a lot of my technical difficulties on the Fae, but I think it's usually just me being a dipshit. So, I mean, it could be. Well, it's not out of the realm of possibility, but.
That's a big possibility for me too. Believe me, that's like there's a lot of dipshittery that happens.
Yeah,
in the studio.
Yeah, I am my own worst enemy with that stuff. Question: what was the time frame between all the knocks that you were hearing until you heard that hello on the EVP on the recording?
Oh, the long time. Yeah, the knocks were last summer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I haven't been out of the city in a while. So aside from this trip with my mom, no, that was quite a distance. This stuff seems to happen. Again, I seem to pick up hangers on. When I got back from Minnesota, I was there in November for a wedding, and we had some stuff. I had some stuff happen on that trip, and I seem to recall there was a bit of a clinger there too for a while. I don't remember the specifics anymore, but yeah, there was a bit of a hassle there.
So with the EVPs then, as of late, are you thinking it's tied to something in L.A. or something here? Or, I mean, are we going down that path with Peggy, or what are you thinking so far?
To all you restless sleepers and midnight creepers, bleary-eyed truckers in the graveyard shift, this is Brennan Storr, and you're listening to Largely the Truth. Whether you're staring at a screen or the lines on the road, all is well, and for the next hour it's going to stay that way. Because I'm here, you're there, and together, we're going to explore the night. Did everyone out there have a good Easter weekend? We did. It was quiet. We, of course, living away from family as we do, we don't get a chance to see everyone as much as we'd like. But the advantage is you start building your own traditions, and I've really enjoyed that. Those traditions, however, led to the most confounding incident of my holiday, and indeed the most confounding incident of my life past 35, all 2 weeks of it. Both my wife and I had Friday morning off, so we decided to head out for breakfast to this little spot we like just outside of town. And while we were there, we got talking, as we usually do, to this young gal who's a hostess. She's, I think, maybe 22. The kind, works on the weekends, lives with her folks, goes to school during the week. And she decided on that day that she was going to compare us to her parents. I'm sure Revelstoke Jim is out there having a chuckle at my expense over this, because, man, I was confounded. The basic context of it was she asked whether or not we were working that weekend. Of course we weren't. And she said, "Oh, you just remind me of my parents. Every weekend they go to their same little diner and they have their little meal." And the hand motions she was making as she did this, it looked like she was either cutting a very tiny steak, mixing a very tiny salad, or operating a very, very small walker. And none of those things are particularly appealing to me. And after she left, my wife nearly died laughing because she knew that behind my polite, fixed smile, there was not a very happy camper. Because this kid is maybe 13 years younger than me. But what do you say to that? How do you come back to that without sounding like you're desperately trying to make a case for you not being older than you are? So that was my Friday. And it was a weird one. But someone who had a much better Friday than I did was the San Francisco-based artist Ash, whose debut album Mother finally dropped on that day. I met Ash 10 years ago in a Casablanca hostel, and he was a great guy. He partnered up with my cousin and I, who were traveling, and a couple of missionaries we met who were on vacation from their time in the Ivory Coast, and we spent a couple days exploring the city. Prior to that, we had been told not to go to Casablanca because it's too busy, there's no culture, or the culture's kind of been bulldozed by commerce. But I got to say, we ended up there after leaving Rabat because of riots, and we had more fun in Casablanca than we did anywhere else on that trip. And I credit a lot of that to the company we kept. It's been very cool watching Ash develop as an artist, and I really feel like he's got something special on his hands with this new album. It is just a beautiful, lushly produced piece of music, and I'm very proud to bring you the lead-off track from that album tonight. So, to celebrate the release of Ash's brand new debut album, this is Chaos. I'm Brennan Storr, and you're listening to Largely the Truth on 92.5 Stoke FM.
Honestly, I'm not sure. I'm still, I think there's, like we said, it's such a nebulous thing. There's no real way to think, no real way to know for sure. So I don't know if it's something followed me or if it's. Actually, this is interesting. I forgot about this. The other night, I was asleep, but my wife woke up, and she said she heard it sounded like a helicopter. She said it was so loud she thought it was right outside our window. And I didn't wake up, but I slept badly. I remember having a troubled sleep that night, and I woke up a couple times feeling like something was wrong, but I didn't hear anything. But yeah, she said it was like an enormous helicopter outside our place. She thought it landed nearby, and then it kind of picked up and left again. And what's interesting about that, aside from the obvious, is that late last year, actually, it may have been around the time of that recording of the breathing sound, but I woke up, I want to say about 2 or 3 in the morning, and I heard what sounded like something huge breathing outside our window. I mean, I can explain it. It sounded like something massive, inhaling and exhaling outside our window, just really quickly. But then also that night, a friend of mine, around the same time, who they live on the other side of the park, they heard what sounded like something scraping from one side of their house to the other.
Oh, hell no.
Yeah, almost like a wind, but a wind full of dust or something. It's hard. She said it was difficult to pin down exactly what it sounded like. And then Ian also, he heard something as well. I can't remember the specifics of what it is he heard, but he was like, at his home. So it was hard. We all sort of spent time in this office, all three of these people, and we all heard this thing. So it's not like there's not precedent for what my wife heard. It's just hard to wrap our heads around it.
Right. Well, and it's not all auditory. I mean, you actually were seeing kind of, like you said, like the darkness starting to amass together. And then, of course, Ian's back was to it, but he could feel it. So it's not just auditory anomalies going on over there.
No, and I there's one thing I'd never mentioned on the show, but after we went to the break on 30, once Ian had told that story, we turned all the lights on. And we do mention that on the show. We went and turned all the lights on in the studio. But even with the lights on, there was a moment, I don't even think I mentioned this to him, there was a moment where I was certain for a second I saw a black head peeking out from the other side of the wall. I know it was really, and it could have just been my imagination, because I have seen that in this building. Back when I first got into the paranormal, I saw it was much more dramatic. I saw an all black head peek out from behind a coat rack on a sunny day, hold there, and then pull back. This was just more of a feeling, like a transitory sensation that this had happened, but still it was jarring.
Do you remember, and I think you kind of alluded to this, when you were saying how Stacia, when we all finally packed into that room with Peggy, how she was like, make sure you say hello and make sure you say goodbye. It's very similar to Robert the Doll, where it's like you have to be very respectful.
Right.
And you need to ask permission and this and that. She wasn't saying anything like that. She was just saying, okay, well, make sure you say hello, make sure you say goodbye. But it just really reminded me of tread lightly, just like with Robert the Doll. Not that anyone was being disrespectful, and you certainly weren't. I mean, neither one of us said anything in the room. You especially. You didn't ask any questions. You didn't say anything to her. And
I said hello and goodbye.
Yeah. You didn't ask any questions. So, if it is Peggy, and that's a big stretch, of course, to say that she's kind of hanging out with you a little bit there, especially that hello, because it is crystal clear. It's just interesting to think about, because considering what happened with somebody that doesn't know us, Adam, and she's like, did you hear Brennan? Or yeah, this freaking guy right here, dude.
Yeah, that was yeah, I don't know. It's so strange. I mean, I kind of wonder if it's just an opportunity for something to, that maybe it wasn't Peggy. Maybe that's just an opportunity for something to reach through and make contact. Like I said, it's so hard to know. And because it happened here, again, I wonder, is it something to do with the building? Is it something to do? But again, maybe the building is just a thin spot. It's just another opportunity to come through.
Right.
I mean, we had, I don't know if I told you about this. I may have told the story on the show. I was going to work on my radio show one night. This is about 3 months ago. So it was around Christmas, because Christmas was a very thin time for me as far as having these interactions. I had a lot of unusual stuff happen around Christmas and New Year's. But I was getting ready to come work on my radio show in the studio. For whatever reason, I couldn't motivate myself out the door. Just couldn't get my butt up off the couch. And finally, about 10 o'clock at night, I thought, okay, time to go. I'm going to go down, just put in an hour, just bang it out. Because I'm only, I want to say, about 4 months into having a radio show. So I'm still learning, and so I thought, okay, I'll just put an hour in, get done what I can. As I got up off the couch and went over to put on my shoes, I got a text message. And it was from a friend of mine, the same friend who heard that scraping sound outside their house. And my friend said, hey, how's it going? I said, I'm good. And she said, are you at the office by chance? And I said, no, funny you say that, though. I'm headed there. I'm going to go do some work. And she said, maybe don't. She said, I don't know why. She said, I'm sitting here watching a movie, and all of a sudden I got this really strong feeling like there was something happening at the office that you shouldn't be there for. And I thought, okay, and now this building has been broken into before. I know there was one night where I thought, I'm going to go to the office, and then kind of thought, nah, maybe not tonight. I feel like I shouldn't go there. And someone had broken in. So, I mean, it happens. But my friend said, no, it's not that. She said, I can't explain it. She said, it's not like something bad would happen to you or something it's not like it's something with bad intentions for you. It's more like a natural disaster of some kind, like that, something like you would get swept up in it. So I said, okay, go there, but I am curious. So I got in the car, and I wouldn't go in the building. So I got in the car, drove downtown, and it was interesting because I felt blackness as I drove to my office. I felt blackness in that part of town. And I'd never felt that before. I'd never felt anything like that. It felt like there was a shroud over that part of town. Like there was just no air there whatsoever. And then there were people around, but that particular area, sort of to my left, sort of to I want to say my 11 o'clock, it was just, there was something about that. And then, so I continued down the road, turned left onto the street, which leads to the parkade next to my building. And I looked at the building where the studio is located, and it's just a squat little building. There was nothing to see visually, but in my mind's eye, I saw this enormous pillar of swirling black smoke, much taller than the building, but right on the spot where the building is. It was like a whirlwind, and I thought, wow, I don't want to be anywhere near that.
Did it go up so high that you lost sight of it, or you could tell where it ended?
I feel like I saw where it ended, but I'm not sure. I just remember I was sort of looking at the building, and I knew it was bigger than the building, but I didn't really go, because I was driving at the same time, so I couldn't really focus that much. But again, I didn't see it. It was more of a felt thing. But what really hit me, and this is the part that sort of cemented in my head, because you could always say, oh, it's BS, you're imagining that. As I crossed the street, so I'm going down one street, and as I crossed the street where I would ordinarily turn left to go to my building, sort of like once I had a direct line of sight on that, it was like there was a cold wind blowing down the left side of my body. Like the coldest, like someone had a blowtorch on my body, but instead of being hot, it was cold. And it was only on the side that was closest to that what I perceived as being a whirlwind. And I have no idea what that was. But the next day I had to come into work, and the whole place felt like a beach after a tropical storm. It just felt flat and lifeless. It was incredible.
Wow.
So again, I don't know if it was Peggy. I don't know if it was Zak Bagans creeping on me, or if it was something to do with the building or something following me.
Well, if he was going to mess with anybody, it'd be you.
Yeah, I tell you, man, when I found out he might be there and that we might actually have to meet him, I was more scared than I've been. Oh, geez.
It's way worse than Peggy or Robert the Doll or anything. Yeah, I could feel... I was attention. I was like, I kind of wanted to give you like some kind of a side smirk when she said that, but I didn't. I held it to myself.
You saw his car in the back, didn't you, when you went in?
Yeah, but the thing is, I didn't realize that he bought that, renovated it, physically drives it. That's what he drives, I guess, when he goes to the museum, which I suppose is fitting. But I saw that because I parked. They let you park in the little area, and then when it gets late enough, they have to shut the gate and then let you out again. But yeah, I parked not too far away from that. I saw it at the end. I didn't realize that signified that he was there. I thought it was a prop for some, maybe they pulled it out for whatever, photo ops or some crap. But I didn't know until later on that was his vehicle, and that signifies he's at work. He's at the museum, his pet project. So I was laughing and grinning wildly inside when she said that Zak was physically in the building.
Oh. Well, I mean, again, maybe this is just all some elaborate prank. Maybe one of these days I'm going to freak right out, and then old Z-Bags is going to zip line in and just have a great laugh at my expense.
I think something I like just as much as all of the little acronyms you come up with the different mixes of his first name and last name, or last name only. It's one of my favorite things. You refuse to fall into you just won't be bought and sold by Zak Bagans, period.
No, that's it. I mean, again, kudos to him. He's made a career and a living out of this. I think we all wish we could do that. So, I mean, again, on that level, I respect him. And if it was just entertainment, I wouldn't even care. I wouldn't. I mean, and honestly, I don't really care one way or the other that much. But it sounds funny. But the thing that annoyed me is just watching his show, and I think he's backpedaled on some of this. He's sort of kind of come around on when he would taunt ghosts.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Because, and again, if you want to do that on your own time, I mean, I think it's disrespectful, but whatever, I don't care. But putting it on television, I felt puts an idea in people's head. And they think that's how this works. And then, on his show, they just reinforce bad information. Like the episode they did on Poveglia, where, everything is a portal to hell. Poveglia is a portal to hell. And they just repeated whole cloth all the myths about Poveglia, that it was a mental asylum, that it was an evil doctor who killed people there or performed, experiments there. And it was a lazaretto, and the island is half made out of the ashes of the plague dead. But I did, I don't know, a few hours of research when we did our Poveglia episode, and I was able to find out that none of that is true. I found there was a crime writer named, I can't remember anymore, he's an Italian fellow, but sure, I had to translate his page from Italian using Google Translate, but I mean, that's not hard to do. David Bassano, that's his name, David Bassano. But, I found out that Poveglia was never a lazaretto. That was, that was one of the other islands in the Venetian lagoon. That it was never a mental asylum. That was, I think, San Clemente. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was that was yet another island in the lagoon. It was an old folks' home, sure, yeah, it was an old folks' home, and it was a quarantine station, I believe, briefly, but no one stayed there. It wasn't like they quarantined people on there. It was just sort of a place where they checked the ships. So it was. None of those things were true. And I mean, maybe it's haunted. Sure. I mean, it's possible. But none of the things that are in all the popular stories about Poveglia are accurate. And it annoyed me when I watched the Ghost Adventures episode about that with all the resources behind them, they didn't care. They just told a story because it was a good story. And again, it's entertainment. I get it. But you're presenting this as something that is real. And when you tell stories like this, I feel like it hurts what people like you do, and people like, I guess to a lesser degree what I do, in that we want to be, well, I don't give a shit if anyone takes me seriously, but I want people to take the subject seriously and to consider it seriously. And so when people have these things happen to them, they don't feel like freaks, so they don't feel weird, or they don't feel stupid coming forward and saying, hey, I saw this shadow thing walking down the street, or I heard someone say my name in my ear. I mean, again, there may be wholly rational explanations for this using science we don't yet have, but regardless, people shouldn't feel stupid coming out and saying it. And I feel like shows like that sort of use lies and half-truths kind of just, they reinforce the idea that this is all a carnival sideshow and that we're all just making stuff up to make a buck. And that annoys me.
Yeah.
Also, I don't like his hair.
His hair's gone through different permutations, and then, of course, he wears glasses now, and he says that's because of the Demon House in Indiana. So, I don't know. Make of that what you will. Is Demon House, is that still on Netflix? I have yet to watch that, or do you have to buy it through iTunes or something?
I'm not sure. I don't know if it was ever on Canadian Netflix. Our Netflix sucks more than yours does.
Oh. Our Netflix is getting pretty badass, finally. I mean, they've upped the price a few bucks, so... All right, so before we get to the plugs for your wonderful book and for the shows, I posted on Facebook right before we got on, and I said, talking to Brennan soon. Anyone have any questions? Chris Holm had a question, why does he hate Zak so much? I think we just covered that. Mary wants to know, let's go to this one first. Where is the creepiest place you've ever been?
The creepiest place I've ever been. That's a tough one. I think one of the creepiest places in terms of bodily concern, concern for my safety, I would say the creepiest place I've ever been was City of Industry, California at about 1 a.m. Because I was stupid and I like taking pictures at night in industrial spaces, and I was down in Industry, which is home to total 200 people across 12, I think something like 12 acres or 12 square miles. That's what it is. There's something like 200 people. It is empty, and the crime rate is not great. And I'm just down there, stupid tourist that I am, snapping these creepy night shots. And I felt jangled the whole time. I felt unsafe, but it's just because I've never been to a city before, or a major city like this. So I mean, that would probably be the creepiest place in terms of obvious grievous bodily harm that could have happened to me. I think, another creepy place I've been to, or another creepy sort of, again, this could have been either. This could have been bodily harm, or this could have been picking up something. I don't know. This is 10 years ago now, and I wasn't really sensitive to these, or I didn't know I was sensitive to these things back then. But I was in Asila, Morocco in 2008, and my cousin and I wanted to get back to the train station, but we didn't want to pay for a cab. So we started walking, and I think the train station is a couple miles outside the city. And so we're walking along these, really dark country roads. And at one point, we could hear what sounded like a big dog, at least one big dog, snarling off in the distance and barking. But everything outside the road was pitch black. And we were just walking from pool to light to pool of light underneath streetlights. And there was a stretch of about, I don't know, maybe 300 feet that was total blackness. And having to walk through that stretch of blackness, hearing those dogs somewhere in the distance that we didn't know whether they were tied up or not, that was probably one of the creepiest things I've ever had to do. And again, that was just worrying about being attacked by dogs. But that's up there. And I think actually it just reminded me of one more. And I would say this is probably the creepiest situation I've ever found myself in because of how alone. And that was in the desert. And this happened back in a few years ago now, but my friend and I were driving down in the desert, down in the American desert. We'd gone through the national park, one of the national parks in Utah, Bryce Canyon, I think it was. Mm-hmm. And gorgeous, yeah, absolutely. And so the way the trip had been going, we were just finding a motel once we were done driving at the end of every day. But for whatever reason, all the motels around that town were full, the town next to Bryce Canyon. Mm-hmm. And not only were they full, but every motel in the neighboring towns was full.
That's the start of a great horror flick right there. That's like quintessential.
Yeah. So we go to the nearby McDonald's, and we were sitting there, and it's open late and they got Wi-Fi. And we're trying to figure out where we can go. We finally found a room in Hurricane, Utah, which is about an hour to the northwest, completely out of our way. But we didn't have another choice. So I got the last room at the Super 8. But before we headed out there, we thought, well, let's see if there's anything, anything creepy out there. And so we find there are tales of skinwalkers near what's called the Best Friends Animal Sanctuary, just outside of Kanab, Utah. So we drive out there down this hill, and it's a little ways outside of town. If you look at it on a map, or on Google Maps, there are houses nearby, but at nighttime it's pitch black. It felt like the far side of the moon. And went down into this canyon, past the animal sanctuary, which of course by this point it's about 11 o'clock at night, was all shuttered. There are trees on our right, and then we pass the paved road ends, and it's just hard packed pink dirt at this point. And the road starts to narrow, and to our right is what I believe is Angel Canyon. And again, it could have just been a 2-foot drop, but it was the sea of blackness. And by this point, my cell phone the service was gone. And we kept driving, the road kept narrowing. And finally, I said to my friend, there was a turnaround. And I said, you know what? Even if there's no such thing as walkers, we're a couple of city-fied morons out here in the desert with no cell service and no water. This is a bad idea.
Yeah.
So we pulled a U, went back, went to Hurricane, and that was fine. But then the next day, we were driving to the north rim of the Grand Canyon. And we're heading in, and I noticed that the car said we had almost a full tank of gas. And I thought, well, that can't be right, because we've been driving a lot and we haven't filled up in about a day. So just on sort of a suspicion, I pulled into the U-turn, went back to the Chevron, and the tank was almost empty. And now this is a brand new, it was a brand new 2014 Subaru Forester, and it had worked perfectly. My friend bought it, drove it off the lot about 2 months before we went on this trip. And so we filled up the tank, but then we were driving into the North Rim. The miles remaining gauge suddenly said something like 700 miles, instead of what should have been 300. And we thought, well, that's weird. But, these things, they make mistakes. So we stayed at the canyon until we saw sunset. And then we had to drive to Cortez, Colorado, which I think is about 6.5 hours away. So we left quite late. And part of that drive takes us through I think it's US Highway 50. I'm not 100% sure of that, but it takes you through the Navajo Res. Through down around Four Corners there, and we had found online, in Hurricane the night before, we'd found these other skinwalker stories from a town called Kayenta in the desert on that road. So I was joking, we're gonna see some skinwalkers this time. So we're driving, the miles are ticking down. It's probably about 11 o'clock by this point. We're just us and 2 lanes, a highway, and then blackness on either side. And I noticed that the display, which has the time, temperature, direction, and miles remaining, went blank, and a number flashed. And I thought, well, nope, I couldn't see it. But I said to my friend, "Did you see that?" And he had. So it happened. Then it happened again a minute or two later, and my friend said, "Okay, it just went blank, and on the miles remaining place, it said 1 a.m." And I thought, okay. So we keep driving, and I look at the GPS, and I do a little quick math. I realize 1 a.m. puts us around Kayenta. Mm-hmm. So where we'd heard these skinwalker stories. And I thought, okay, yep, great, that's funny. So I tell my friend, and he says, well, I guess we're going to die here. That's fun. So we keep going along. 1 a.m. comes and goes without incident. Nothing happened. And then I want to say it was about 2 in the morning. So I think it was about 3 when we finally got to Cortez. But maybe it was about 1:30. The GPS beeped. And it had been saying, in 10.5 miles, turn left. In 9.5 miles, turn left. And I think we had about 5.5 miles to go when all of a sudden it beeped and said, in 0.5 miles left. And my friend pipes up and said, I thought it was 5.5 miles. I said, it was. So slowed down, and it kept doing this. It kept saying, 0.4 miles, turn left, and 0.3 miles, turn left. Finally, it says, turn left, and we'd slowed right down to a stop. Now it is literally just the highway, us, and then off in the blackness, you see the blue where the sky meets the horizon, and that's it. And this thing is telling us turn left, and there is a road. There's a dirt road leading off into the distance with spray-painted white tires on either side of it. But it's just dirt, and it just goes into the darkness of the reservation. And we looked at each other, and he said, well, is it a shortcut? And I said, well, if it is, I'm not bloody taking it. And he said, well, so we're not doing this. I said, we are not doing this.
Did he want to?
And I think he would have. I think he was looking to me to set the pace, So I think if I had said, okay, well, let's give it a try, I think he would have gone along with it because he's pretty skeptical.
Yeah.
But I said, no, this is not happening. So we just kept driving. And then what's interesting is the GPS kept saying, make a U-turn, make a U-turn, make a U-turn. And I thought, no, we're not doing this. So I stopped the route, reprogram it. It just keeps saying, make a U-turn, make a U-turn, make a U-turn. And so I actually had to hard reboot the thing to get it to work. And then finally it just kind of clicked and went, yeah, in 4.5 miles, turn left.
I wonder if you guys would have turned down there, what might have transpired.
Well, that's the question. I mean, when we finally got to Cortez, we fired maps and we looked and we found, and that road doesn't go anywhere. It's not a shortcut.
Oh.
It just leads into this tangle of rural roads on the reservation.
Oh, so it's one road that just leads to many others that you could maybe take to your final destination.
No, but we followed those roads and none of them were a shortcut. There was nothing that qualified. Yeah, it just doesn't make sense.
Why the hell would she be telling you to turn down some random ass road?
But it is, I said, we sort of, we joked that was the Skinwalkers making one last big play.
Yeah, right out in the middle of nowhere.
And his truck, once we got back to Austin where he was living at the time, his truck or his SUV started working fine again. No problems. He took it
took it
to the garage. I couldn't find anything.
Did you guys ever consider camping? Or are you desert campers? You're always just kind of, hotel stays such.
I'm not really a camper. I mean, I used to camp back when I lived in Revelstoke, but I mean, camping was mostly just an excuse to get hammered. Right. So, I mean, I don't own any gear. My friend, he has hitchhiked across the U.S. before camping, so he had done. But no, we hadn't really considered it on that trip. It was sort of a kind of a fancy, as fancy as staying in motels can be, kind of trip. So we never considered camping in the desert. And I mean, after that, I definitely would be in the desert. So
I think
really
creepy at night.
Oh yeah, and so that's probably the creepiest place I've been to. Was that little stretch of highway at 1:30 in the morning when the GPS was telling us to go somewhere we knew damn well we shouldn't. It really wanted us to go back in there. It said, kept saying, go back and turn left. Nope, nice try.
I'm like, How about
so that's my long-winded answer to her question.
The second part is, and this probably is a quick answer. You'll know it straight away. Next book, when's it coming out? Mary wants to know.
I don't know. I'm very much the kind of person where I don't go somewhere until I'm called. I don't. And so I'm working on something. I have been working on something. A lot of it. The short version is I think it's going to be fiction. I have been on some fiction stuff. It's a long ways off because I haven't really done much fiction before, so I'm sort of flexing muscles that I don't really have yet. I think the next book is going to be fiction, and that's for a variety of reasons. But as for the next paranormal book, I don't know. I mean, I had some ideas, and I was looking into one thing, and then I was sort of warned off it, I guess you could say. I don't know. It's just waiting for something to catch my attention. I mean, the ideas I've had. I thought about doing a book on Ghosts in Los Angeles, and my publisher said no, and then I did the episode on the show about it, and it didn't work. That episode was really resistant to being made. So that's no good. And I've had other ideas, but again, nothing that calls to me. But as soon as something calls to me, I'll be there. And in the meantime, I'm hoping I can get this fiction book done. I don't want to say too much just in case it doesn't happen, but that's sort of what I'm focusing my writing attention when I'm not writing the show.
Well, yeah, and I'll say I know a little bit about that project, and I would definitely be excited to partake and read in that. So, So that was Mary's questions there. There might be others on Facebook, but I'm not going to get my phone out right now. So if you would please, sir, plug both of the radio shows and, of course, where to find your book, A Strange Little Place.
Strange Little Place is available everywhere fine books are sold. That's Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all those places. I don't think it's in many stores anymore, but it's available online. And the show, Largely the Truth, that's just a weekly music show on Stoke FM. You can hear that Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Pacific on 92.5 Stoke FM if you're in the local broadcast area, which I assume most of you won't be. But you can also hear it on stokefm.com. And again, that's 8 p.m. Pacific. And that's just the weekly trip through the soundtrack of my brain. You know, it's kind of whatever I'm listening to at the time. I try and play new artists. So if you've got a group, you got something you maybe think you might want me to play, you can get a hold of me. I don't play everything. You know, I sort of am picky. I recently had a bunch of people follow me on Instagram, like musicians and things, and I kind of don't know where that came from, but yeah. And so anyways, but yeah, so no, it's just a weekly trip through the soundtrack of my mind. And then the Ghost Story Guys, that's every 2 weeks. We're on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, and everywhere else possible, except for Spotify. We're working on that. And that's just me and Ian Gibbs, who just looking at various paranormal topics and sharing creepy stories and having a laugh, because we don't want to take ourselves too seriously. I'm sort of researching and writing the new episode right now, and that's going to be about the hauntings of Detroit. So I haven't said that anywhere else. So that's some info for the fans. And then, of course, we're going to play that EVP we talked about on Tuesday's show. And then once the Tuesday's show is out, if you want to add it to the show, then you're more welcome to. That's it. Yeah. Any final thoughts or anything else that you need to say to the listeners? No, I think I've done my fair share of yakking already. This what happens when you get Brennan on the show and get him talking, man. He just goes. You're a great guest. That's what you're supposed to do. Yeah. Fair enough. Nobody likes getting the cattle prod out, right? No, that's true. We've been there. That's no fun.
Well, I'm so-and-so. I was given this name by my parents. I've been to such and such a college. I've done these things in my profession. I produce a little biography. Buddha says, forget it. That's not true. That's some story. That's all gone. That's all past. I want to see the real you are now. Well, nobody knows who that is. Because we don't know ourselves except through listening to our echoes and consulting our memories. But then there's a real you, and that again leads us back to this question. Who are you? That is the real you. We shall see how they play with this exam by the koans to get you to come out of your shell and find out who you really are. If you are liberated, you will understand that you're not. past doesn't exist. The future doesn't exist. There is only the present. That's the only real you that there is. The Zen master Dogen put it in this way. He said, spring does not become the summer. First there is summer, and then there is spring. When you settle down in the train to read your newspaper and so on, you are not the same person who a little while ago left the platform. If you think you are linking your moments up in a chain. And this is what binds you to the wheel of birth and death. But when you know that every moment in which you are is the only moment, this comes into Zen. A master will say to somebody, get up and walk across the room. And he comes back and he says, where are your footprints? They've gone. So where are you? Who are you? When we are asked who we are, we usually give a kind of recitation of a history.